This video is going to be on the affirmative that bans nuclear lethal autonomous weapons that a lot of teams, including Harker and Harvard Westlake, have been reading on our topic. Alright, so this is probably going to be the longest video because I expect both Harker and Harvard Westlake to both read this affirmative, and it has been one of the more popular affirmatives along with the China AF on the topic. So both the Harker and the Harvard Westlake AF are very similar in that they say that states ought to ban essentially the lethal autonomous weapons that are integrated and used with nuclear weapons. So all AI capacity and integration with and according to affiliated with nuclear weapons should be banned. We'll go through the Harker version of this affirmative first. So they say framework on top of this version, unlike the last one which said it on the bottom. They don't have a piece of evidence, but it's basically your same util contention you've seen in every one of these planned affirmatives. So their specific one says states ought to ban lethal autonomous weapons designed to target and launch nuclear weapons. So both targeting and launching. So they only have one contention for the Harker AF, and it's nuclear war. The first piece of evidence is a piece of layered evidence that says that the competition between the United States and Russia using lethal autonomous weapon systems will cause a nuclear war via these AI integrated nuclear weapons. So that's the first piece of evidence. And then the second piece of evidence says that these new lethal autonomous weapons will target second strike capabilities, and that's something that is particularly escalatory because it causes sort of mindset shifts for accidents to happen where people think things are going to happen, or machines think things are going to happen, rather, because of things that they perceive. So, for instance, this particular piece of evidence talks about how if these autonomous systems perceive that the second strike capabilities of the US or Russia are threatened, that it could launch these types of laws. The next piece of evidence you should remember because it was actually in the China affirmative, and it says that these anti-submarine lethal autonomous weapons are also going to cause nuclear escalation. So they have a bunch of different arguments. I assume that they would solve the anti-submarine warfare because they're claiming that it would be on nuclear submarines. So then their impact to all of that is just nuclear war, and they read the same sort of it leads to extinction evidence or a version of that most people read. They then read a piece of evidence that talks about how there will be cyber retaliation because of things, or not because of things, because of malware that these autonomous systems will perceive are an offensive attack, and that will cause them to retaliate. And these types of spoofing cyber attacks on early warning systems that make them think things are happening that aren't cause nuclear war and escalation to happen that would lead to things like a nuclear war because, again, we're dealing with nuclear weapons. And then they read a piece of evidence that says specifically how we need to ban these type of AI augmented cyber and nuclear capabilities. I assume that by meaning target nuclear weapons, they're saying ban cyber lethal autonomous weapons potentially that would target them. And then they read a specific piece of evidence talking about a automated system that Russia has that we won't get in much to. And then again, just making a spoofing argument again, but this time talking about NORAD, which is the organization within the military that controls our sort of like nuclear command defense system. So That is the Harker version of the affirmative. The Harvard-Westlake version of the affirmative is quite similar and uses a lot of the same pieces of evidence. Let's go to their plan text first. It says states ought to ban lethal autonomous nuclear weapons. So it's very similar. It's almost more to the point. So let's go to the top of it. First is that they say their value is consequentialism and has a bunch of reasons for that. Consequentialism, essentially, you should think of this in debate as another way of saying util, and debate this like they're saying utilitarianism. Their criterion is prudence. This seems like a lot just like util again. So again, yet another planned affirmative using util. The first contention they have is nuclear modernization. They say that they are modernizing their arsenals and we need to eliminate human control. Or not that we need to, that's happening now. And this meaningful human control statement we'll probably see in the next video. But that's not the point. So this is very similar. And then they read the same piece of Clare evidence that talks about how when we have automation, that would lead to potential systems where computers gain control of nuclear weapons and use them all against humanity. Again, the same argument, same piece of Clare evidence, just two shorter versions of the same argument. Then they read a piece of Rodriguez evidence that talks about how AI controlling nuclear weapons removes humans from the decision-making process. A lot of this normally talks about, actually, yes, this evidence does, talks about this Soviet air defense officer named Petrov who disbelieved his computer and saved the world, or so that is how it is told by a lot of historians, because he disagreed with what his computer system said and chose not to launch all of Russia's nuclear weapons, or not all, I guess, but a lot of them, or alert people because of this. Again, another piece of Clare evidence making the same spoofing, hacking, automation type of arguments that we saw in the Harker affirmative. Again, this is the same affirmative, just a little different packaging. They say nuclear war is bad, and then they say we need human control. So this is important. They're saying humans are better than machines. So they're making the specific argument that maintaining human control is good. So that's important because if you were neg, you could say machine control is good. This statement, meaningful human control, you'll see in the Marlborough affirmative that we'll talk about next. And then they read a piece of evidence saying you should be skeptical of artificial intelligence and that AI, another AI Clare piece of evidence. So this is the nuclear affirmative, yet another planned affirmative that you're likely to encounter a bunch of times at Marlborough. So that was the nuclear affirmative, and you will see a new plan in the next video. See you next time.